you're doing your research in ChatGPT, or you're doing it. I don't know people that use Gemini, but some people might. So I'm just going to stick to ChatGPT for now. Okay. But even with the AI mode, right? Even with AI mode, you're going to have the benefit. You're going to talk to it, and as research has shown, you don't leave it. You stay there until you're ready to leave, because you're in the comfort of your own home. Essentially, you're having a conversation with a friend. You're getting some information. It helps you do research, and at some point you're like, hey, I feel love to make a decision. And when you do, I mean, there's not much that's going to prevent you from heading back, right? And I want to ask you one last question on this topic, which is, are we focusing more on bottom of the funnel for this? Are we focusing more on middle of the funnel, or more top of the funnel when it comes to exposing these internal insights, these unlocked gems, essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends, of course, is the answer that everybody hates, because it's not actionable at all for me just to say, Sean, it really depends. But it depends, because how much value is the business getting out of those top of funnel visits, responses, citations, that sort of thing? We've relied on them so heavily because as SEOs, the job is to get visitors to the site, to earn the click, to get that site, that impression, not just the impression, but the actual visit itself. And so the session, and so we've measured on that, as you mentioned, as a vanity metric. But what did that really mean in terms of revenue, actually driving revenue for that business? And so I think it depends, because there are some exceptions that I've seen where that top of funnel informational query could result in revenue, sort of thing. But that's the exception, not the rule. So I think we really have to challenge our traditional thinking around that, around visits, around traffic, especially because with so much of the experience of someone doing research, looking for information, making a decision, with so much of that happening in the chat now without visiting a website, and even the bottom of funnel being very close to happening in the chat now with the new partnership, the new integration with Etsy. Now, someone can buy something off of Etsy without leaving the chat conversation. And if I'm running, growth at I don't know, WooCommerce or Shopify or Wix or Squarespace or any of the comparable platforms that have an e-commerce components, that enable e-commerce for businesses of all sizes, I'm going to be right there on the heels of this Etsy announcement. In fact, I've probably been working on it for months or years, and it just hasn't been announced yet. So what does that mean for bottom of funnel transactions also being completed completely in a chat response? So we already know that a lot of those higher funnel answers are being provided right in the chat response. Hopefully we have a strategy for visibility beyond those top of funnel queries kind of thing, those research sessions, those information sessions. Hopefully we figured out how we can turn that into revenue beyond just someone visiting our site, because realistically, that may not happen. That really could not happen, and still businesses stay in business. It really is a paradigm shift for sure.
It definitely is. And right now we have the specific examples when it comes to e-commerce, and I can actually say that the CEO of Shopify has actually said that they already have their integration with ChatGPT, and it's coming live very soon. I'm not even sure if Sam Altman spoke about it on Dev Days yesterday, but it's coming. It's coming soon, very much. I think I just want to make sure we address this also towards our viewers. Is towards the question, like, is it the bottom, the middle, of the top of the funnel? The question is, look into your data, I think, and I want to come back on this a little bit later. But before, I just want to clarify two things. Because I have some interesting things I still want to really bend your ear about. And I think it's going to leap into this. But before that, I think we need to clarify two things to the audience. Can you clarify to us, explain to us what are vector embeddings and what are what's query family? Let's make sure we all know what this is.
Yeah, vector embeddings. This is how Google, for example, looks at topics related to a particular query. So if, and there are a number of examples that are used, almost overused, because I don't think they really give it, full value for the complexity around these vector embeddings. But imagine being able to take a sentence, for example, and create a numerical value out of that sentence. So I've got imagine whatever sentence on your website there that may provide some sort of topical clue about what the page is about, what the offering is about, and take that and turn it into a number, like a hashed number, something really long. This is long value essentially, but it's a value, and so now I can take that value that I've created out of the words, turn that into characters, numerical value, and I can plot that in 3-dimensional space relative to the initial query that might land someone on that web page in the first place. And now I've got this 3-dimensional model. Imagine this 3-dimensional graph, and I've got value number 1, which is the query that someone types into Google, and value number 2 is the sentence in my on my page that relates to that query, not just in terms of how we understand the text from a language perspective, but we've quantified these. We've actually assigned them a value, and now we've got this 3-dimensional space that we can then chart and compare these two different values to. One is the query, the other one is is my content that relates to that query. But now let's just use top 10 traditional responses. The 10 blue links that we know and love are certainly near and dear to my heart. And so now let's take the potential response from each of those 10 queries and add them to our 3-dimensional space. So this won't be quite enough values, but imagine each one of those is one of my fingertips. So now I have the initial query. Let's just say it's right here on my glasses, the bridge of my nose. This is the query. Then I have the top 10 results in this 3-dimensional space. I know this is a weird response, but the distance between the original query and each of my fingertips representing those traditional 10 blue links, one is going to be closer than the other. I'll just put my thumb really close. Some of them are off the chart. They're not even there. Others are sort of hovering around the space. They're almost like in separate galaxies of this universe that's represented by my screen. I'm just coming up with this analogy off the top of my head. But one of them, the thumb on my right hand here, might look like my left hand to viewers, is closest out of all of these individual responses sort of thing, the top 10 results. When we embed these vectors, these vectorized values here, we can chart them in 3-dimensional space and look at the proximity between the original query that someone typed into Google and these top 10 results. The one that is closest is considered to be the most relevant to that initial query. That is, really weird analogy with my fingers all over the screen. That's vector embeddings. And so we can think about some examples that are often used. They're escaping me because I can't think about them, in the moment. But essentially, if we change those values, essentially all these values here, the one that's my thumb, if I rewrite that content, or actually let's use my pinky over here because that's a better example. If I rewrite this content and its new vectorized value is closer to the original query, now I can optimize my content in a way that makes it more relevant to that original query, and Google is much more likely to show it in the top search results. Essentially, how can I get, just based on content alone, and there are a whole bunch of other factors, 10,000 sub-factors we think to Google's algorithm. There are all other things, but content, just looking at content alone, that would be an example of a vector embedding and how we can optimize that content and change it over time. There are, and Google certainly has been using this for an extended period of time. It just hadn't gotten very much publicity or awareness in the SEO community, and therefore in the broader, in broader marketing segments kind of thing. Or certainly business as usual, it really didn't get picked up too much in terms of vector embeddings. But there are a number of individual SEOs and thought leaders in the space that have written extensively about it, sort of thing. The information is out there and it's fascinating. We just have, as it was starting to raise awareness, ChatGPT came onto the scene, and we spent so much time focused on ChatGPT and what that means for marketing and commerce and everything else. And vector embeddings, which are very much a part of AI models, just really hasn't gotten sort of its due awareness at this point yet.